Live in the top left corner. There we go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Ways and Means Committee. This morning, we're having a briefing from the State Board of Elections. Administrator Linda Limon, I know that she has her staff here as well. We really appreciate your time this morning and look forward to all you have to say. I do want to suggest, as I look through your briefing packet, that we do first those 7 pages on the election and then take questions, then talk about voter education, a new round of questions, the judge page, and then the part on the future. So we can break it into those 4 parts so members' questions can stay relevant to those topic areas. So thank you again and welcome again to all the members. And Ms. Limon, if you'd like to introduce your staff and if you'd like to get started.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be back with you all this year. I have Nikki Charleston, our Deputy Administrator, Donna Duncan, who is Assistant Deputy for Election Policy, Jared DeMarinis, who is the Director of Candidacy and Campaign Finance and is one of our 2 legislative liaisons, and finally, Mary Kramer Wagner, who is Director of Voter Registration and Petitions and is the other legislative liaison. And with your permission, I'd like to have the PowerPoint displayed, if possible. Sarah?
All right, here we go.
Thank you. So next page, please. So giving you some general turnout information. Almost 75% of our eligible voters voted. It's the highest turnout since the 2008 general election, which was 77.55. How voters voted was very different than prior elections. About 50% of our voters voted by mail and 50% voted in person. We had a little over 4 million voters that were eligible to vote. 74.6 of them did vote, which is a little over 3 million. 49, almost 50% voted in return to mail-in ballot. And as I said, the other 50% voted in person. Our in-person voting, next slide, please. Thank you. This is the first election where more voters voted during early voting than on election day. In prior elections, 25 to 30% of the voters who voted cast their ballots during early voting. As you can see, the busiest days were the 1st and 3rd. In prior elections, the busiest days were the last 2 days, with day 2 a close behind. Could I have the next slide, please? Voters in this election had a very different voting pattern, as we've showing you, and they did this because we asked them to do that. We asked them to vote by mail, as it was the safest way to vote in a pandemic. We asked them to vote early if they preferred or needed to vote in person, and they listened, as you can see by that slide. Let me get to my next page here. Could I have the next slide, please? So our mail-in voting statistics, as I previously stated, almost 50% of the voters voted a mail-in ballot. Almost 89% of those voters who registered a mail-in ballot returned it. And this is the highest return rates since the 2008 general election. More mail-in ballots were counted as a raw number and as a percentage in this election than in any other election since we've been keeping this type of data. Next slide, please. Same-day registration and address change was also a big hit. This was the first election for same-day registration on election day, and over 13,000 individuals used the process. There was a 60% increase from the 2016 general election in the number of individuals using this process during early voting. So, all right, you want me to skip over the public education?
Nope, I don't want you to skip over anything. I want to lead it to the members to, if they have any questions about the election itself. Delegate Ivey?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for all of the work that you've done throughout this pandemic, throughout our election cycle. I had a question of something I didn't see on one of these slides, and it's very comprehensive thus far. Could you tell us if there were any, if there was any proof of any voter fraud taking place with these mail-in ballots?
We have not seen anything.
Thank you.
And if we would refer it to the state prosecutor, for
Absolutely.
example, if somebody voted twice.
Thank you. I just think it's going to come up in our committee a few times this year.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Ivey.
No, I would say Delegate Ivey, there wasn't any significant voter fraud found anywhere in the United States of America to add to your answer there. The next question we have is from Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this in-depth briefing. For the last 3 years, I have been requesting, and then last year I was joined with Delegate Mosby, now Council President, for you all to share the numbers, disaggregated data on the recently franchised group of voters that were formerly incarcerated. And it's my understanding that 2 years ago, you signed an MOU with Department of Corrections to get that information together. I'm still asking for it. I was told that this committee would receive it, and broken down by county. How many times do I need to ask? Is this something that's going to happen? I think it would greatly benefit us and show us what our efforts are doing to enfranchise more voters, and would love to see that as soon as possible. Any comments on that?
Certainly. If Nikki, can you address that? We had a fairly large program last year especially for the general election, to reach out to our eligible but incarcerated individuals, and it had mixed success. Nikki, are you available to tell them a little bit about what you did?
I sure am. Thank you for the question. So what we worked with the Department of Public Safety and with advocacy groups to put together a mailing to individuals who are eligible, but are inside a facility where they can't take advantage of all of the opportunities that we have. And so what we did was we did a mailing we did two different things. So in individuals who were in state facilities, we sent actually an individually addressed packet to each of those individuals. Obviously, we got that data from public safety. That was a snapshot in time, and so we sent those. And then we also provided to the county facilities unaddressed packets of materials. So in each envelope, there was a letter explaining what the eligibility requirements are for individuals who are in correctional facilities. It included a voter registration application and a request, the form that we all received in the mail to request a mail-in ballot. And then it also included a return envelope with postage paid. So very similar to what all of us received. We just added in a voter registration application and a explanatory memo letter so that they could understand, am I eligible or not? So we shipped unaddressed packets to each of the county facilities and individually addressed packets to the individuals in state facilities. It was about 7,700 packets. We are collecting the feedback as to, from that mailing, how many individuals registered to vote, how many of them voted. So we're still in the process of collecting that information from the local boards of election. But I can tell you that it does about 40% of the packets that we mailed to the individuals in state facilities were returned. So we're doing a deeper dive in that data, but it does seem that perhaps mailing unaddressed packets and working closely with the correctional facilities to distribute those is a better approach, and that they can be redeployed if somebody declines or says they're already good, so that we can be more efficient in sharing that information among the individuals who are eligible. So we did something different this time. We're still collecting the data, and we'll be happy to share that with you when we get it. It has to be captured outside of the system, so it's a little bit of a manual process boards, and they're providing that to us as we speak.
Okay, great. And then second question, if I may, Madam Chair. Okay, the second question that I had is that your group had come out and said that they would not be doing precinct turnout for the primary and the presidential cycle. But I do believe that you you are releasing information for precinct turnout for the general.
Correct.
And last time I checked on the website, and now this was a few weeks ago, that was not complete. Do you know if that's complete yet or when that'll be available?
I believe it's complete.
Complete now, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have another look, and if I have any more questions, I'll get back to you. Thank you for all your work and seeing us through this last election.
Thank you.
Yes, next question, our new Election Law Subcommittee Chair, Delegate Wilkins.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the very brief presentation on this section, Administrator Lamone. I wanted to ask a couple of questions about vote by mail. First, after seeing such a wide use of vote by mail, how are you all anticipating any increase and working to sort of make sure that there's a smooth process if there will be more use of vote by mail? How are you sort of anticipating that and working to make sure that we're prepared?
Well, the vote by mail process that we used in November was pursuant to a gubernatorial proclamation. And if we don't have something similar in place or legislation authorizing that for the next election, we will revert back to the way we've been conducting elections in the past, which is probably about 6% of our voters, or maybe more now that they're used to it or experienced it, will vote by mail and everyone else will vote in person. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think one of the things from the primary last year that was very clear was that our voter registration list, was not super accurate in terms of making sure that we have people who are currently in the state and residents and alive and things like that. Are there steps that are being taken to clean up our list to make sure that we have as accurate as possible voter registration list?
Well, we strive to do that every day, Delegate. Part of the problem is we can't remove someone because, for example, an obituary appears in the paper. That's not a legislatively authorized method for removing somebody. So if the local boards, oftentimes when they see, for example, an obituary, then they contact the family to verify whether or not the person is indeed passed. And what happens also, a lot of times, children grow up and they move out of the house and they go out of state, but we never, no one tells us that. And unless we know someone is moved, we can't remove them. So the process of maintaining a voter registration list of over 4 million people is sort of a living process. It's constantly changing. But unless we are provided the information from a reliable source, we can't act on an individual voter. So, and we have found that problem was especially with people leaving the state, but not notifying us that they have done that. And then, of course, the local boards continue to send them the specimen ballot and so forth. But unless it's returned, moved out of state or whatever, the local boards don't know.
Okay, so final question. In terms of vote by mail, and I'm thinking again about the primary and how we mailed out the ballots and how to really encourage the vote by mail as opposed to in person. Is there any analysis that you all have done? I've seen some of this in other states and other places, but analysis around how vote by mail impacts communities of color. Were you all able to see any increase or decrease or specific challenges based on communities that we know have a high population of people of color versus those that don't? Was there any analysis or information that you're able to share in terms of particular challenges or lessons learned as it relates to the vote by mail in that sense?
I'm not sure that I have seen anything specific to Maryland. Nikki, have you seen anything?
Well, have you all done any or have had any type of analysis or observations from last year's election?
We haven't formally done any of this work. We are happy to provide data for somebody that's probably better equipped to do that analysis. All the data that we have, we are happy to make available. I'm not sure that we have the the right people to do that analysis, but maybe
Okay.
with a university or a community organization that can dig into that. We are happy to partner with them and provide them with that data and look at it and come to draw some conclusions from it. But we don't have the right people to do that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Delegate, Mr. Vice Chair, Delegate Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just based on the election law subcommittee chair's question, it seems like we need a racial equity coordinator at the Board of Elections to be able to look into those issues. You guys can say hi to my dog Policy that just popped in here for some reason. Just nosy, man. Ms. Lamone, everybody, good to see everyone. My question is a simple one. What day did Maryland finish counting its general election ballots? Do you know the exact date?
I don't, without getting my calendar out from last year and looking at it. When did the local board certify?
I think the Montgomery County Board of Elections was the last one to finish, and I believe they finished very early in December, first, second, maybe third, early in December. They were likely finished counting earlier, but they didn't finish all of their audits and wrap up and certified early in December.
Got it. And when did the state certify the election results?
Ugh. I have to get my calendar out. Donna, do you remember?
From what I gather, it seems like we were much later to certify our elections, and I know that we have the ability to tabulate mail ballots, early on, and much earlier than other states. And it seems like from my records and my recollection of when we actually certified the election, that it took much longer than it needed to be, or most other states. And I just want to know why. What was the holdup? What were the challenges there? And what occurred during that time?
Well, as Nikki just referred to, Delegate, one of the things that we require the local boards to do before they can certify their election is to go through a very comprehensive audit of the process that was followed to conduct the election. And so once they've done that, making sure everything matches and that all the requirements that the state board and the legislature have put into place have been complied with, and then they can certify. So I don't think it's a matter of being slow to count or whatever. It's just being slow to make sure everything was done correctly.
And can you speak to Ms. Lamone, can you speak to the issue of hiring a racial equity coordinator so that they can review this and make sure that we are treating all of our all counties, all areas equally? Can you speak to that issue or that potential?
We'd love to look into it and examine how exactly we can implement that. Would be fine.
Okay, I look forward to you looking into that then. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I want to tag on to Delegate Washington's question in terms of the timing. My understanding is over 160,000 votes had to be fixed, handwritten, because of people printing them off themselves at home, and obviously it having to be on the proper paper and so forth. How much did that slow down the process?
I don't think it slowed down the process a whole lot. And Montgomery County probably was the biggest jurisdiction impacted, as I recall. And we had a discussion with the local election directors sometime before the general election, and the issue was brought up. And I believe it was Prince George's or Baltimore County's election director said, "People, don't worry about it. We've got this." I remember her saying. And I think they all feel that they have it. They've got it.
Well, understanding that one person is writing and that one other person is watching, and that's happening in all 24 jurisdictions, if you all can get back to us with a better estimate of that, because that seems like a big number of ballots that needed to be fixed. Next, we have Delegate Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have several questions. The first one I would like to ask is, do we have software that verifies signatures on the front of the envelopes when they're mailed in?
No,
We do not.
we do not. We're not authorized by law to reject a ballot because the signature doesn't match.
Okay, so I was just curious. The other thing is, are we using any software that's not, or machines that are not made here in the United States?
No.
Good, that's good thing. The other thing is, I was doing some research. Jimmy Carter and James A. Baker III back in 2004 actually addressed the problems with mail-in voting. They said it would be fraught with creating logistical challenges, which we knew we had, and potential for voter fraud because of the way the mail is handed. And the mail-in ballots would, especially the safeguards and lacking of with candidates for political parties, activists, and allow for handling of mail and absentee ballots. I guess my main concern is, given everything that's happened and the alleged fraud that took place during the presidential election, I want to make sure that moving forward that we don't come up with another, don't have this again. And my concerns are about mail-in ballots as far as, like I said, back in 2004, Jimmy Carter and James Baker actually did some research and had a study on it. And just wondering, what's your thoughts?
Delegate, I think that the litigation that occurred across the country, but none in Maryland, showed that there was no widespread election fraud in this election.
And we've been doing mail-in ballots for decades, Delegate Long. We've only just changed the name.
Right, I understand that. It's not. I guess the question I have is, what the research that I've done. It says basically that having all mail-in ballots like we did during the pandemic, for the most part, actually could create a problem with fraud and different things. I just don't want to see this model that we did during the presidential election go forward because of some of the things that happened, allegedly that happened. We want to make sure no one's disenfranchised from voting. And with the mail system and getting lost in the mail and stuff, I feel that probably some people might have not got their vote counted. That was my concern.
Delegate Long, I think you keep presuming of some kind of fraud that was rejected by over 60 courts. So I think Ms. Lamone has already answered your question in this regard.
Right. No, I'm saying I'm not saying it was or it wasn't. I'm just saying there was fraud alleged, and I don't know whether it was or not. Yes or no. I'm not going to make that judgment. I didn't see all the evidence. The only thing that I'm here for is to make sure that the state of Maryland doesn't have the same problem, and that's why I was asking these questions, Madam Chair, respectfully.
Ms. Lamone, I think you've already answered. Is there anything else to add?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
All right. Delegate Guyton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the majority of my questions had to do with any possible statutory changes they needed for us to make sure that we were able to continue and expand mail-in voting. And that was asked by Chair Wilkins. Thank you. And also for timeliness of certification. I believe those have sort of been addressed. But I would like to ask you, you mentioned that there were 112,000 provisional ballots cast. Could you please let us know approximately how many of those were accepted or not accepted and for what reasons? I think this sort of goes to that issue of making sure that every vote is carefully examined.
I think that report is Nikki, it's already available on the webpage.
It is, but I'm happy to highlight some of it for you. The percentage of counted ballots was 96.7% of the ballots cast, which is pretty high, which is great. And so we do have on our website that we can provide to you a breakdown by county of the number cast and how many were counted and rejected. But the vast majority of them were counted.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. And just to follow up on that, for those 3% of the ballots, which is a significant number that were not counted, what were the reasons that they were thrown out?
So the most common reason was that they had already voted. So they'd already returned their mail-in ballot and then also went to vote the provisional, which is not unexpected as going to vote by mail. So that was almost 40% of the rejected provisionals were that. And then it sort of tapers off pretty quickly after that. But I can share that with you. But that wasn't unexpected, moving to a more of a vote by mail scenario than we've ever had before.
Yeah, thank you very
Ms.
much.
Charleston,
Due diligence.
I'm sorry, Delegate Guy, Ms. Charleston, and that provisional acceptance rate, that's similar to other years or higher?
I believe it's higher than other years.
Yeah. Thank you. Next, we have Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have questions in two categories. The first is an issue which I think, following up on the Vice Chair's recommendation to have a racial equity coordinator. One of my concerns, and I just want to make sure that we're making sure that we are giving everyone good access to voting, is this year for Election Day, we used voting centers as opposed to the traditional precinct polling places. And I understand the administrative reasons for doing that. And I think they, for the most part, operated well, but I'm concerned about what impact they may have had on making it more difficult for some citizens to get to their polling place, especially in communities where a lot of voters may not have access to a car, and transportation could become a barrier to voting. So have you all done any analysis of that?
No, we have not yet, but it's one of the things that we have on our plate to do, because if we do want to use them in the future, we want to make sure that they are in fact located in easily accessible, convenient places. We tried to do that for November, but as you probably remember, we were running pretty fast. So, and I think the voters that, at least the anecdotal evidence that we've gotten, a lot of the voters really liked it. One of the things that surprised me was that the voting center in Baltimore City at Camden Yards wasn't the most popular place to go. I thought everyone would want to go down there to see Camden Yards. So.
Okay, thank you. And my other question or questions have to do with the tracking and communication process about mail-in ballots. So, I think I voted by mail-in ballot in the primary for the special election in the 7th Congressional District back in February. And one of the challenges I had, one of the concerns I had, was that when I went into the system to check the status of my ballot, after I had already delivered it in person to the Board of Elections, when I checked online to see the status of it, it still showed as ballot was available for download. Okay. And so that was a problem. And I know I've spoken with my local board about it, but this last election, I was impressed with the communication that came about my request being received, my ballot being received. And so not only was it more timely, but it was proactive. I didn't have to go in to look it up. So are those changes that you are planning to continue? And what are the timeframes that you plan to get those notifications out?
Well, we absolutely want to continue to do that and expand upon it. Well, one of the limitations, of course, is if we can't do it if we don't have the voter's email address. So we're striving to get as many email addresses as we can into the system so that the automated push of those emails, i.e. your ballot's been counted, can continue and indeed be expanded. We're also looking at a way to utilize the post office tracking method so that the voters can, like you do with your packet from Amazon, you get an email that track your packet and here's your tracking number. And so you can just follow your ballot as it moves through the system. So we're hoping to be able to implement something like that for the next election.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Delegate. Next question, Delegate Boatler. Delegate Butler, while you're trying to figure out the unmute, we'll move along to Delegate Smith.
Is that ready? Is that
There
it?
you go. There you go.
All right, good. Now, my question is about the ballot boxes that we've seen sit out in certain areas around the city and around the county. I want to share an experience that I saw, which I found very, very disturbing. Honeygo, which is an early voting center, my wife and I walk that. They have a walking area there. We walk it a lot. And in the primary, the one day I watched a fella pull up in a beat up looking vehicle, open a trunk, open a box, and dump all these ballots into the back of his trunk and then drive off. Now, that concerned me because I'm sitting wondering, well, what's the chain of custody here? You know, how do I know this guy even took the ballots to wherever he was supposed to take them? And a number of other people that were there that day too, they were like, what is this? You know? And I just found that very disturbing because, you know, we do say, oh yeah, there's nobody cheating with the ballots or anything like that, but that just didn't look good from optics. I'm guessing that he was, you know, from the Board of Elections, but it just seemed kind of weird that he did that.
Delegate Butler, did you approach him and ask?
No, I didn't, because it's sort of like one of those things that it happened so quick that you're like, what just happened, kind of thing. And so, yeah, he drove off before I could find out whether or not he was. But, you know, I know years ago, you know, one of the big questions was always the chain of custody that we, especially with early voting. I remember when early voting came in and the fact that these, you know, voting machines would sit in there for days without, you know, any protection of those things. And this I just found very, very disturbing. See that. And the second thing is in the general election, I did see there were security guards that showed up. Now, in that case, I did talk to them and I asked them, I said, well, you know, why are you here? And he says, well, we're here just to make sure that these ballots are secure. And I said, so you're going to be out here all night and all? And he goes, no, we have a route that we have to do. And I'll be here for, you know, 1 or 2 hours. Then I move to the next one for 1 or 2 hours. And there again, it's like, well, you know, that concerns me because between, if somebody knows the schedule that they're doing, they could come behind them and take these ballots. So my question to you, you know, is this having these boxes out there? Matter of fact, I don't ever remember them being vetted even through the legislature, but having this box out there, really, I'm very concerned that they're not safe just to have them sit out there like that.
Well, the state board
By the
required,
legislature, it was an executive order of Governor Hogan, I believe.
yes.
Well, I understand that, but I still think that when you're making a change like that, I really felt that should have been brought through this committee. And it should not have been just done in that manner because, like I say, I watched a guy pull up, dump these ballots in the back of his trunk and then drive off. And then you see, you know, they have, you know, the rent-a-cops and they're not there the whole time. They come and they go. And I think we've had some problems. I think somebody or one of these guys were assaulted in Baltimore City, I think, but that had nothing to do with the ballot. So, you know, my view is how, you know, are these things really that secure at the end of the day?
Well, the local boards were required to have 24/7 security on all of the drop-off boxes. They could do it with cameras. They could do it with security guards. Some of them did both. And there were very strict procedures that were put in place for collecting the ballots from the drop-off boxes on a daily basis.
Now, I think that in the general, I think there were cameras on it, but I don't think in the primary there was. And I'm telling you, there were other people that was there, and we were like kind of stunned, like what was this? You know?
Were there cameras in the primary as well, Ms. Lamone?
Yes.
Well, I didn't see
And if there
anything
were a
that
problem at a
indicated that
particular polling place, they could have checked the camera and seen what happened?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, so it was at
You reached
Honeygale.
out to your local board of elections at the time that it happened. And they could have checked on the camera.
Well, there was no indication that there were cameras in the primary. I saw a notice on the box in the general that they did indicate there were cameras there.
Either way, anytime you see a problem, you should immediately call your local board of elections. That's the best way to solve these issues and find out what's going on. Delegate Smith?
Sorry, I had some issues with my mouse. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this presentation and feedback. I just had a quick question about how ballot curing works in Maryland. If a voter has made some type of an error on a ballot, is there a way that they're notified so that they can make those types of corrections? Can you walk me through that?
Sure, I'll let Nikki do that since she developed the process.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So there was a process put in place for both the primary and the general elections for curing a mail-in ballot that was returned without the oath signed. The local boards were required to try to contact that voter however they could, email, call, mail, to try to get a signed oath. Once the ballot is removed from the envelope, if there's an issue with the ballot, at that point it is separated from the envelope and there isn't any way to find out whose ballot that is. So really the emphasis on curing is to get the signature. That's the biggest effort to cure. And so that effort was in place for both the primary and the general, and it did help hundreds of voters who had inadvertently signed or returned an unsigned oath be able to sign that oath and have that ballot be counted.
Ms. Charleston, is that curing something that you all do every election cycle?
This was the first election cycle that we had it as a state policy. When we surveyed the counties, it turned out most of them did it, but some didn't. So we just formalized the process and then made it be the same across the state.
Ms. Charleston, are you also tracking the data of how many cured ballots are per jurisdiction?
So we have the, so the counties might have that. I don't think that we have how many they cured. We know how many were accepted and rejected.
Right.
Those ballots moved through that process and they ended up being, but not how many contacts they made that was captured at the county level.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Lasanti?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you very much for this presentation. Two issues that I'd like to touch upon, if I may. I think we all agree that integrity of the election is paramount to our democratic process. And we've had a little bit of discussion about this during the briefing. Ms. Lamone, if you would you please outline for us, because I think it's important for the committee and for the public also to understand what the process is if someone has a question about if they view something that they believe is irregular, or if there's something that they think is wrong with the process. How do they make a complaint, and what happens to that complaint? How is it investigated, and what is the process, so people know that something just doesn't go into a empty box?
Well, it depends on the nature of the complaint. If it's criminal in nature, that's one thing. We generally refer it immediately to the state prosecutor, whether it be a campaign finance violation, perhaps illegal campaigning. We immediately after the election review all the potential double voting issues, most of which are not truly double voting, i.e. Senior checks in and junior is marked off instead, and then junior shows up. Well, obviously they didn't double vote. If, for example, what the delegate mentioned earlier, that he witnessed a supposed irregularity at the drop-off boxes, that, as the chair said, should be reported immediately to the local board of elections, if not to us as well. And we look into that to make sure that there wasn't undue. If it wasn't a camera there, why not, and get one there? If I'm trying to think of other instances that we get.
So in summary, an individual can make a complaint.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
If as an elected official, if a constituent calls me, I can make a complaint.
Yep.
If a member of Congress has a complaint, they can make a complaint, right? I mean, anybody can file a complaint in your office. And then is that your testimony?
I'm not sure if Linda's having some internet connections. I can just confirm that is the case.
Okay.
We take every complaint and respond. And we heard from any of you forwarding complaints from constituents, and we immediately look into them. And we have a process for doing that.
Okay, very good. I think that puts that issue to rest. And the last question is about the entire election process this time. I mean, first of all, I think you guys have done a great job. I mean, this was a moving target, and this election, let's be honest, this was an election in many ways. The rules were governed by executive order, not by the legislative process. Generally, elections are defined by the legislative process, but this time a lot of the changes were implemented by executive order. So having said that, what are the lessons learned in any process, any government process? There's always things that you look at in hindsight and say, we could have done better, or, you know, this we did on the fly and it worked really well. So we would like to continue that. Is there anything that you can speak to that in those lessons learned?
Oh, boy.
Or is that a separate briefing?
I think that's a separate briefing.
Okay, but maybe that is something that you come back to us as particularly, and I'll say to my Madam Vice Subcommittee Chairman, maybe that's something that is a meeting that maybe the subcommittee can farther investigate a little bit.
Well, I can tell you the things real quickly that worked well. The voter education campaign that we had worked well to make sure the voters knew what they had to do in order to vote. The emails, as a delegate mentioned, on the status of the ballots, that worked really well. We want to expand it. We need, as we talked about earlier, if we're going to use vote center model for election day, we need to make sure that they're the right place and the right number. The drop-off boxes, were they the right number and were they in the right places? I think those are some of the things that we have, and I was going to mention them today, that we have been talking about internally. One of the things that happened during the election in November was mailing everyone an application for the ballot created a huge workload on the local boards of elections. And processing those. And if we're going to do that, we need to find a way to help them with that burden, so that they're not trying to do a zillion other things in order to get ready for the election, but also having to process all those ballots and applications. And then when the ballots come back, we need to, if we're going to have a large mail-in ballot usage in future elections, how can we help the local board develop processes to receive those ballots, do the curing and everything else without totally paralyzing them? So those are some of the things that we have been looking at. I'm not sure I would characterize them as necessarily lessons learned, but things that we want to try to do in the future.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
I want to follow on with something Delegate Lasanti said, and really relevant to something Delegate Boatler said. Earlier this year, when I saw that the state board website had incorrectly referenced our Board of Elections district for one of our members in the election, I contacted our deputy administrator in Montgomery County, and that was fixed on the state site within a day or so. When people contacted me about not receiving their ballots, I reached out to the Board of Elections to ensure they would get their ballots. And in one case, literally our Board of Education member's son, his ballot that was, his application that was turned in by hand at the board's office was kind of put aside and ignored for some reason. It was just a human error. So I found during the election that every time I reached out to my local board, that they were able to immediately solve a problem, help a voter, immediately answer my questions about anything in regards to the process. So I could share that with people on my Nextdoor site, on Twitter, on Facebook, and the like. So again, as elected officials, we all have that responsibility to help people and be honest about the process. And we all have the opportunity to reach out to our local boards, and all should if we thought there were any problems of any sort. So I just, what Delegate Lisanti was asking about, we could all have done that immediately at any point with questions or concerns. Delegate Palakovich-Carr with a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Piggybacking on Delegate Smith's questions about ballots that were, mail-in ballots were rejected for lack of signature. I mean, I appreciate all the work that the local boards do on the back end to correct that when they identify that there's a problem with a particular ballot. But I'm kind of curious about on the front end, and if someone could speak to what's been done to have clearer instructions or better design of the form so that it is more apparent for voters that they need to sign their ballot. And if perhaps there's been, some more systemic review of that to make sure that we're heading that off at the front end of the process.
Yeah, Nikki, you want to jump on this because I know you all have been talking about trying to help with this issue.
Sure. So we've sort of already pulled off the low-hanging fruit, right? By making a big black X on the line. We did that probably 10 years ago, and we saw a dramatic reduction. So the easy stuff we'd already done, but we did some other things. So we used, there's some usability experts out there that have contributed to the elections community, and they've proposed some envelope templates that we incorporated with some very specific instructions to remind voters before they send it back in. Here's a final checklist. And a huge part of our voter education campaign at the end was make sure you sign and return your ballot on time. We saw a dramatic reduction in the number of ballots that were late, which I think is in part to that message clearly. And with having ballot drop-off boxes, people could, instead of putting it in the mailbox, they put it in a ballot drop-off box, which reduced the likelihood that that ballot might be delivered late. So constantly trying to look at what we can do on the front end to prevent the work on the back end is something that we're always striving to do, and open to suggestions about how to do that better. We know that we need to make our instructions as clear as possible, and these usability experts, some of whom are at the University of Baltimore. We also have another nationally recognized usability expert who is now a Maryland voter. And so she was helping us with some of that, and we'll continue to work with them because it makes everybody's lives easier if we can get in clear and concise instructions out at the front end. So we'll continue to work on trying to reduce that. And then what we can't reduce, we'll have to have that cure in place to remedy it for those voters.
Thank you. Delegate Branch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is kind of piggybacking as well off its Delegate Smith's question. So working on the front end as far as trying to resolve some of those issues, have you thought about using barcode software when printing? I know that they have software that when you print each address that they will automatically generate a barcode to be to identify those those ballots that you're sending out. So in the event that someone does not sign their ballot, you can just simply use the barcode that is there to identify who that ballot belongs to.
So we do use barcodes that are include the voter's ID number. So we do track that back. The part of the process that we're trying to, that we then need to reach out to that voter to say, we got your ballot, it wasn't signed. So we do use barcodes. We're always open to using more if it makes it more efficient. We also use some of the USPS barcodes to help us with ballot tracking and through the process. So barcodes have certainly dramatically improved our ability to process things more quickly, and we're looking for more ways to use them if they exist.
Thank you, Delegate
Thank
Brandt. Great question. All right, if we can move along, I think we spent a lot of time on this part, but I think this may have been more of the political types of questions. Can we go into voter education, please?
Yes, thank you very much. Nikki, this is her baby.
So on the slide are just some data, not going to really go through them all, just sort of give you a sense of the scale. It was a 3.5-month campaign, which enabled us to have more planning and do more outreach than we did in the primary election with just a few weeks. And so here are just some of the raw numbers. It included both traditional voter outreach, so TV, print, radio, press releases, as well as a lot of digital, which those are the big numbers that you see on the screen. I want to just point out that it was statewide, it was diverse. We had a very diverse team helping us. After a competitive procurement, we were able to expand our team and make sure that we were hitting all the corners of the state, all different groups of people. And then we also did lots of town halls, or over 25 town halls. The next page is some of the grassroots and community campaign information on there. If you could advance to the next slide, please. We engaged more than 1,900 organizations, from chambers of commerce to faith-based groups to civic organizations to community groups. Anybody that reached out or we were connected to, they were added to the list. And we were sending out materials regularly throughout this period. You all received many of them. I'd like to thank you for those of you that took our icons and our images and our messages and pushed them out to your constituents. We couldn't have spread the word as much as we did without your assistance in this effort. So thank you for that. And then again, anytime someone asked for someone to come speak, we participated, from smaller community-based town halls to TV channels and national radio stations that had election information. We participated in those. On the next slide, we've done some preliminary analysis as to sort of how successful was this campaign. And so we looked at 4 messages that were key messages of our campaign, and then look to see what the data showed and did voters hear that message and change, in this case, change their behavior accordingly. And I think it's fair to say that they did. So again, as Linda mentioned, our message early on was voting by mail is the safest way to vote, right? That was the message that we were promoting. And when we look at the numbers, it's clear that voters listened. Almost 50% of our voters voted this way. We've never even been close to that before. I think some of your questions already this morning are about, well, what happens if it continues? And I think those are discussions that we're already having them and we'll continue to have them. Reminding voters to return their ballots, right? Once we mail them out, we want them to come back. We want to be able to count them. And so almost 89% of our voters returned a voted ballot, which, as Linda said earlier, it's our highest return rate since 2008. We really promoted the ballot drop-off boxes. It was, of course, all in the news about issues with the United States Postal Service. And so we can't take credit for all of that, but the fact that we had them out there and based in communities that people hopefully had access to, that the ballot drop-off boxes were a huge success. Of course, we don't have great data on that because this is the first election cycle that we've used them. But if we look at the primary election, 13% of our voters used those. And this time it was about 2/3, over 1 million voters chose to return their ballots at a box rather than using the Postal Service. And then one of the other messages, because we knew that there were going to be people that either wanted to vote in person or needed to. And so we wanted to try to engage them and send the message that if you're going to vote in person, to please do it early. Give yourself plenty of time to make adjustments to your schedule so you're not forced to stand in line on election day because you have no other option. And based on the data that Linda showed earlier, voters listened. We've never had our first 2 days of early voting be our busiest 2 days. Never. And we had more people voting during early voting than we had on election day, which has never happened. So in looking at what the key messages and the behavior we hoped voters to do, I would say that our voter outreach and you know, it wasn't just the paid campaign. It was efforts like all of you to share the information. It was the state board and the local board's messaging. We were consistent across the messaging. And I think it's really fair to say that our collaborative, our collective voter education effort, of which this paid campaign was a big part, was successful in getting voters to vote safely, to vote, and then vote safely in the way that they felt that they most wanted to participate. We do have a very full campaign report on our website, which we can provide the link to the committee after today. And again, just wanted to recognize that the effort was widespread and statewide and was really a robust effort to educate voters. And we think that there was a lot of value in this, and is one, as in response to a delegate's prior question, is one of our lessons learned, is that there's always something changing about an election. And so that gives us an opportunity to educate voters about the change, but also about the importance of some of the mechanics about signing the oath, returning your ballot on time. Those exist regardless of the change. And so that's another lessons learned, if you will, for future elections, that we continue to provide some kind of statewide multimedia campaign for voters.
Thank you both very much. And I like not only your efforts, I know that a lot of my colleagues were trying the same thing as much as possible, not just answering questions, but putting information out there. I've changed my background picture to my wife and I and AJ voting with our at our local drop box. She's too young. She doesn't need a mask yet, in case anyone's wondering. Anyway, does anyone have any questions on voter education? If not, we'll just go to that brief slide on judges.
Okay, thank you very much. It was very impressive with the number of voters who expressed an interest in serving as an election judge. We were really concerned about that, more so when we were considering using traditional polling place locations. But as you can see, we had over 14,000 people that worked. Almost 22,000 people used our website to inquire about this. The other thing that we did on this election is through the Department of Health. We had 381 people that served as health ambassadors. And these folks went out, I think it was 5 counties that requested them. They distributed face masks, hand sanitizer, they sanitized surfaces, provided health information, maintained social distancing. It's the first time we've used them. They were very effective and very enthusiastic. So with your permission, I have a couple of people to thank, as you would imagine. First of all, Governor Hogan for his assistance with recruiting election judges and providing flexibility to the process through his executive orders. The Maryland Motor Vehicle Administration for setting up the data processing center at the Glen Burnie facility. They were able to greatly assist with processing of the over 1.6 million requests for mail-in ballots. Similarly, the Department of Budget and Management Office of Personal Services and Benefits, they found the people to man the processing center. It was a very collaborative effort to get this set up. The University of Maryland Global Campus, they were on standby in case we needed an additional data processing center. The Maryland Emergency Management Agency and the Maryland Center for Analysis and Coordination for their briefings and sharing of information throughout the process. The Department of Health for their very sage guidance since the spring and partnership in deploying the health ambassadors. And the state and local election officials who worked tirelessly to conduct this election, they deserve more credit than they'll ever receive. And I'm grateful to work beside them. And the voters, last but not least, they were patient, kind, and enthusiastic about voting in this election. I thought it was a wonderful thing to watch happening. So thank you for letting me have those few moments. And the last thing on.
We have some questions before we get to the future slides.
Sure.
2 questions I see so far. Delegate Washington, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, Ms. Lamone, can you answer a question for me real quick? I'm grateful that we had over 14,200 election judges. I know it was during this pandemic wasn't easy, but inspired by it. I wonder what's the diversity breakdown, if we have it, of those judges, and the age range too, because I know that there was, I see you shaking your head already saying no.
We have
Because I know we passed a bill a few years ago to allow high schoolers or at the age of 16 to be able to participate as election judges, and I wondered if we have done any outreach to those students, or if do we know the numbers at all or anything?
I don't think we have it, but the local boards of elections do, and we certainly can reach out to them, delegate, to see.
Please do.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting to see. Thank you.
I think so too, because there's a lot of efforts to get people
Yep.
engaged this year in the elections, and I think it would be good to know that
Great.
where they came from and how involved they were. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Delegate Wilkins?
Thank you, and congratulations to the team on your work in terms of the education, the voter education aspect. I did see, I got many advertisements and really saw it working in practice. So congratulations on that. My question is, when it came to the engagement that we discussed earlier, I think Delegate Hornberger asked about the incarcerated individuals voting process. Was there a vendor or a consultant or someone that was leading on that? And what was their prior experience, if any, with engaging that population? And sort of how do you all make sure that the folks who are engaging and conducting the voter education have some type of experience in that area? So I wanted to get a better sense specifically for the outreach to the incarcerated individuals.
I'll let Nikki handle this because I think we mainly did it.
So we, over the last 8 months, we're invited to participate in a coalition group that had a diverse coalition, and I was asked to participate to provide information. And so from that group, we had a subgroup that was working on this mailing. And so it included representatives from the ACLU, from Out for Justice, for Common Cause. Those were the three main groups that worked with us to coordinate, or we used a vendor to do the printing, but in terms of what was the messaging, they offered, and I certainly accepted their offer to design that, what I refer to as a letter or the cover page of that packet. They initiated that draft, and we tweaked it to include the election information and then included it in the packet. So there was a part of the voter education campaign that was we did signs for correctional institutions using the icons that we're using throughout the campaign, but the mailing was really done by us and that group, those three organizations that were part of that coalition.
So there was no consultant that had a responsibility around the outreach to incarcerated individuals?
There was some effort that the Graybo was one of the subcontractors through the voter education campaign, that they had conversations with Out for Justice and maybe other organizations as well as to the messaging as well. But the direct mail outreach was really just those advocacy groups working with us and then printing and getting those materials out. So it was a combination between just advocacy groups in our office and then the advocacy groups communicating with one of the subcontractors on that statewide campaign.
Thank you, Nikki.
And Ms. Charleston, if all of you can be available to help Delegate Wilkins on her bill to try to make that voting process easier for the incarcerated individuals, any lessons learned would certainly help in developing her legislation. If you all want to finish up with the last few slides.
Yeah, I think we've gone through the future election stuff already. So if we could then skip, with your permission, to the 2021. There we go. So we have a couple projects that we're doing for 2021. And I'll come back to campaign finance in just a second. Sorry, Jerry, didn't mean to say. So we have 6 departmental bills 5 of which are campaign finance. So Jared will be talking to you all about them. The sixth one, which is an important one, is amending the election calendar to align certain deadlines with the ballot printing schedule for the gubernatorial elections. So I don't think it's been dropped yet, but that's something that's important to us. We're going to have, of course, be working on getting ready for redistricting. That's going to be a huge project for us. And as I told the Senate, we need the final redistricting and reapportionment plans in place as soon as possible. Your election primary is in June of that year, which doesn't allow any of the parties a whole lot of time to develop plans and implement them. And then the other big project for us is we're replacing the electronic poll books. It's a statewide program. The responses to the RFP, I think, are due next week. And we've been providing quarterly updates on the project pursuant to the Joint Chairman's report. So with that, I know you all are anxious to hear from Jared. He has a couple of important messages for you. And then if you all have any more questions, we are delighted to answer them. Jared?
Thank you so much. I think we already have a question if we could. You have a question for Administrator Lamont? Delegate Long, do you have a question? Oh, you have to unmute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't hear. My concerns is about redistricting, like we were just talking about. Do you have a deadline when that's going to have to be in place in case of any court challenges? I know redistricting is going to be very close to the primary. And I'm just curious, do you have a deadline when you have to have that done by so we can do what we have to do?
Well, we're working on that, Delegate Long. As a matter of fact, we had a lengthy discussion about it this week, and we're trying to develop the calendar as quickly as we can, considering all the moving parts that we have to take into consideration. So not yet, we're working on it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And if you can let us know when that calendar is ready, that will as well. Delegate Wilkins?
Yeah, the Senate's already also expressed an interest, though, as you can imagine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this will be my final question, but Administrator Lamont, because you mentioned the poll books, I wanted to better understand. I think that the poll books, from what I read, are at a cost of $30 million. And we absolutely want to make sure we have the best system possible for our voters. But can you share a little bit more about that cost, and if these poll books are going to do, what something new, different, better, and finally around security, making sure that in terms of the vendor, the ways that we're certifying it, I just wanted to really make sure we get on the record and talk a little bit more about the poll books in particular.
Well, we're in the middle of the procurement, and I can't tell you what the financial bids are going to be. And I probably can't talk a whole heck of a lot about it outside of what is in the request for proposals. The staff member that is leading this project is not on this conference today, but I can assure you that, well, number one, the poll books aren't something the public or the voters use. They're purely for the election judges to use as a tool to check in the voters and as a tool for us to manage the polling place and the the voting. I don't remember all the specifics in the RFP, but my recollection is that the security requirements are fairly rigorous, or not fairly, are very rigorous, and that I can't remember what else you said. Sorry, Delegate Wilkins.
I'll follow up offline. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I think there was one other question. Yes, Delegate Washington, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know that we just had I know Jared's going to come up and speak to campaign finance issues. And so ahead of him, I wanted to ask a quick question about campaign finance for you. But I know that we just turned in all of our campaign finance reports this week.
Yes.
And I just want to, I'm pretty sure that everyone on Ways and Means turned them in on time because we're the most responsible.
We are the only committee to have every member turn it in on time, Delegate Washington.
Madam Chair, I figured that was the case. So thank you for that.
We had one person submitted at 11:59 and 50 seconds, but yeah, we're all on time.
I hope that wasn't Mr. Bailey over there.
Mr. Bailey Hornberger, not at all. Not at all.
Very good.
I'm not naming names.
Right.
Everyone can look it up on the web.
Okay.
Anyway.
My question
the
is.
only one's on time.
Yeah. Awesome. My question is concerning, and it's in reference to, campaign finance and enforcement. I know that this committee passed HB 1222 to install 2 new additional staff positions to help enforce campaign finance compliance. We know that's a big issue. We've introduced legislation to make it more streamlined process, to make it to give SBE more teeth to the law to enforce it. But these 2 positions were very important. I know that bill was Delegate Wilkins or Chair Wilkins' bill, and I wanted to know really why these positions haven't been filled yet, or when DBM, did you prioritize these positions when Department of Budget and Management requested what are your priorities? Did you prioritize these positions for SBE?
Trying to remember what we did. Delegate Washington, I don't remember where the priorities were, but we did ask for them. We did not get them.
Did they give you 2 other positions then, or any other positions to hire within the department?
They did. They gave us, I think we asked for 6 positions and they gave us 2.
Okay, and then I guess my question is, why weren't those 2 positions for the? Why wouldn't they? If you would have, did you prioritize these positions when you sent in your 6 requests to the DBM? I don't
recall. I honestly don't recall.
Okay, I think it's really important that we take campaign. I mean, I know that you guys take campaign finance really important. Really, it's really important and take it very seriously. I think that this was a legislative mandate to hire these 2 positions, and unfortunately, DBM did not fund them. And that's concerning to me because as we are considering new positions, like I just mentioned earlier, the racial equity coordinator, which will be, I think, really important there. And if we legislate that, and it seems like DBM, or if it's not prioritized by the department, it seems like they're going to ignore us as legislators passing laws that we are saying that these are our priorities for the state. And so I want to know, I really want to come back to this at some point and figure out how we can get those 2 positions hired in addition, because they are the priorities of the General Assembly.
Okay.
Thank you, Delegate Washington. And yes, Jared, you're up.
Well, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Linda, for the presentation so far. I just wanted to remind everyone that the fundraising during session prohibition has commenced, that as members of the General Assembly, you're prohibited from soliciting contributions for federal, state, and local candidates, including yourself, and to take down your contribution links off your websites and social media accounts. Make sure that it's completely inactive at this point here. So it's just important that that don't forget that. As Vice Chair Washington mentioned, the annual report was filed this week. It was due on the 20th, and congrats to this committee being timely, and over 84% also filed timely as well. So we're very good. And now reminder notices are being sent out to the ones that are delinquent. The 2020 the 2020 campaign finance reports that were filed for the Baltimore City cycle election year will be audited later this year for that. So we're making sure that we're keeping up on the audits on that front. And public financing, the county public financing, Howard County's 2022 will be the first year for Howard County to have a public financing program. We are working with the county to develop regulations and rules for the program, and a summary guide has been posted on our website for that for any educational purposes. The CCF division is also working with Montgomery County on a comprehensive audit plan program for that county's implementation of that. And this will be their second year or second time using the program. State public financing, seed money contributions can start on March 1st of 2021. Currently, the fund has over $3.6 million in it. The fund right now is insufficient to fully fund a candidate for both the primary and general elections if with the seed money and the allocations. So they just wanted to make note of that. In enforcement, we've collected a total of over $100,000 in penalties and late fees. And this excludes any of the fines and penalties collected by the state prosecutors based upon our referrals. So this is just based upon the civil citation authority or late fees authority that we have. Additionally, we have over $5,000 still in pending collection from our letters, our settlement agreements. And the maximum civil penalty that we can levy is $500. So that's it. We received over 90 complaints to investigate in 2020, and we issued over 80 civil citations or settlement agreements to rectify those complaints. And we also conducted numerous audits and reconciliations on political committees to get them in compliance and to look at cash balance discrepancies. On to candidacy here. Candidate filings for the 2022 gubernatorial election year start on February 23rd. So it'll be open starting then. We are currently developing appointment system to handle the in-person filings here and to limit as much contact as possible and to maintain the COVID restrictions for that. As Linda mentioned, with redistricting, if at the end, the filing deadline will end on the last Tuesday in February in 2022. Candidates will be, I guess, moved into, not really moved, but if whatever the correct district for that candidate is, that's where the candidate shall be placed for the ballot. And we will notify, candidates will receive notice if their district changed in the time that they filed for office and when the plan was finalized as well. With that, I turn it back over to Linda and to Nikki, if there's any.
Are there any questions? Jared, in addition to you all obviously checking everyone's campaign finance reports and all the notices you send out, for those of us who use social media and use it for political purposes, it's correct that we all have to have our authority line on our Facebook or our Twitter. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes, because you use it as a vehicle and it would be considered campaign material with the publication of any sort of, yes.
And is that something you all look up and follow up on?
A little bit when it comes across us, but yes, there's a lot of social media accounts out there, but most of the authority line complaints come in via someone else looking at a person, and then we would get it and then send off a letter to make sure that the individual starts putting their accounts on it. But yes, every social media account, Facebook and Twitter, should have an authority line posted with it. So therefore, you don't have to do it per tweet or per post.
Thank you. Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Demaris. I was hoping that you could clarify the process of redistricting and how that would affect filing for running for certain offices in certain districts, because that's about to start, and I know there's a lot of unanswered questions there.
Well, candidates will be coming in to file as normal. For example, you would come in and file for it. We will use the data that we currently have for you, for your district, to make you file the certificate of candidacy. The plan in which the General Assembly will implement and finalize will be after the deadline for filing of candidates. Once that occurs, we will take that data and it would be uploaded into the system, and making sure that all the voters get into the same proper districts moving, but also for you, for the candidates, if your residential address now is no longer in that correct district, in the district that you filed for, we will place you into the correct district for your certificate of candidacy and for your ballot, and immediately afterwards. So once we get the information from the General Assembly, that's when the process will take place.
And when can people begin to sign up?
February 23rd this year. So just, little bit over a month away, you can start filing for office.
All right, thank you so much. Delegate Feldmark?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick follow-up to make sure I understand. So if someone files, you file to run in whichever district you currently are, and if that district changes, your filing automatically stays in place but transfers to the new district. Is that correct?
Because of the constitutional requirements, you have to, so yes, it would. Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I want to thank Ms. Lamone, Ms. Charlson, Mr. Marinus, and the other staff that are on, and for this the great PowerPoint and the presentation and answering all of our questions. To all of those outstanding questions that were asked, rather than sending it to the individual member, if you could send it to the committee and we can send all the answers to all of the members so everyone can see them. And again, members, you can always reach out to the Board of Elections with any of your questions that come up after today as well.
Absolutely, yep.
If there's nothing else from anyone else, the Revenues Subcommittee is going to be having a voting session immediately after this, but I believe it's a different link. So I think you have to exit this and then enter that meeting. Education is then meeting at 1 o'clock. And we come back as a full committee at 3 o'clock to vote on just 6 or 7 bills. So it should be a very quick voting session. If there's no other questions, I'll see y'all later. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.